This Tennessee offensive line is up for the Joe Moore Award. Now, I I'm happy that Cooper Mays won the SEC Weekly Offensive Lineman of the Year award earlier this week. I'm glad he's on our YouTube channel. Please like right now. Hit that thumbs up button. It helps the channel and helps us grow into bringing more players and more big guests into the fold. Subscribe and share, but especially hit that like button. But I think that Cooper Mays would tell you that against Missouri, that was one of the bottom half games that he played. He was called for holding. There were some false starts that you wonder if some of that falls on the center. So Caleb Jaro did a deep dive into the Vols, and they are up for the Joe Moore Award. So I'm going to throw some numbers, Amanda, at you, and you tell me what you think. So we looked at two numbers in this deep dive. We looked at sacks allowed, and we looked at the primary numbers, average yards per game. So I think that's a pretty good measurement of how an offensive line is doing. So Tennessee has allowed 22 sacks on the season. That's 72 nationally. Now, as far as rushing goes, the Vols are 28th in the nation, averaging 195 yards per game. And then Air Force is one of the semifinalists. They have allowed 9 sacks. They're 8 nationally. They average 334 yards per game. So as we go along, we're going to have to take into account what type of offense that each of these programs run. Georgia has allowed 7 sacks for a loss of 55 yards, placing them at number 3 nationally. They average under a sack per game. The Bulldogs average 192 yards rushing per game. Illinois, the Fighting Illini, have given up 18 sacks, averaging 183 yards per game. So I know this is a lot of numbers, but Ole Miss has given up 10 sacks, averages 259 yards per game. That's number 3 in the nation. Michigan has given up 12 sacks. They average 251 yards per game. Oregon has given up 2 sacks, averaged 239 yards per game. The last 2 finalists are UCLA and USC. UCLA ranks 30th nationally in sacks given up with 14th. The Bruins have given up 88 yards on sacks, averaging 1.4 sacks a game. UCLA averages 240 yards per game, ranking them at number 8 nationally. And USC has given up 19 sacks. USC ranks 41 nationally in average rushing yards. The Trojans average 182 yards per game. So this to me feels a lot like one of those Heisman Trophy races where somebody has come out of nowhere and it's a good story. As much as I love Coop, as much as I love the rest of these offensive linemen and respect them for what they've been able to do, when you look at it statistically, they're somewhere in the middle of the pack of these semifinalists. And it would be really difficult not to consider Georgia a better offensive line since they're in the SEC. I feel like it's, again, one of those stories that they came out of nowhere. They got an awful lot of respect, and they deserve it. But if you're talking about just pure offensive line play, Amanda, based off those numbers, I have trouble believing they're the absolute best.
I don't. And the reason I don't is because you look at the defenses that Tennessee's played compared to the defenses that all of these other teams have played. You know, Georgia has a pretty soft schedule. I mean, they have Florida, which is decent, but Tennessee's defense wasn't supposed to be anything special this season. And it hasn't been anything special, but it's been competent. It's been something that they can, if it comes down to it, their defense isn't going to lose the game. But Tennessee's faced some big defensive powers. I mean, they faced Alabama, they faced Georgia, they faced Kentucky, they faced Florida. I mean, they've faced some big LSU, some big defensive powers that Army hasn't faced, Oregon hasn't faced. I mean, a lot of these teams on this list haven't faced the same kind of defenses as Tennessee. I give that nod to the team that's managed to have these great stats and facing the best of the best.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. And again, if I'm saying middle of the pack of the semifinalists, they're only semifinalists. So I'm saying that Tennessee, Brittany asked, do you think that Tennessee's offensive line is middle of the pack because of the number of plays Tennessee runs on offense? Certainly. And when I say middle of the pack, I don't mean middle of the pack nationally. I mean middle of the pack among these top 8 when you look at some of the numbers. But you're right. There is a vast difference in competition level between what a Navy plays and what a Texas or Tennessee or what all these other programs play. So, I mean, that is a very fair point. If I look at it from the eye test, I think that Tennessee's offensive line is an A, and I would have them a solid A over the course of the season, maybe an A minus because of Georgia and some mistakes that they made against Missouri. But coming into the season, Amanda, what were Tennessee fans hoping for? A C plus, a slightly above average offensive line. So I give big time kudos to what Tennessee's coaching staff has done. And Amanda, I mentioned this before. I thought moving Darnell Wright from left to right was a mistake, left tackle to right tackle. That hasn't been a mistake. That's worked out darn good.
Yeah, it's worked out really well, and I think these coaches deserve that credit. But I think the players also deserve that credit. You don't see Hendon Hooker get up limping. You don't see Hendon Hooker, grabbing an arm, a shoulder, or whatever after plays. And there's a reason, because people don't get to Hendon Hooker as much as they get to other quarterbacks around the nation. I mean, we've seen big time quarterbacks go down with injuries this season. Will Levis can't stay healthy to save his life. Poor guy, because his offensive line is just absolutely abysmal. And Bryce Young went down. So you have to give this credit to this Tennessee offensive line, because at one point it's not just how good your quarterback is and how stout and whatever he is. It's how good your offensive line is in protecting him. And I think they've done a really good job doing that.
I agree. Kevin said it's the offensive line of the best offense in the country. It has to be elite. Again, I think, Amanda, you would back me on this. I'm talking about they're one of the top 8 in the nation. That's pretty elite. I mean, there's 120 schools. I mean, not you. I'm nitpicking a little bit, and I think they certainly deserve to be semifinalists in that award. So, Kevin, please don't take that the wrong way. I just thought it would be interesting to look at how they compared statistically to other teams that are up for that award. Joe says the line has been savvy too, like take a hold then every once in a while rather than your quarterback getting blown up. Yeah, I mean, I think that happened against Missouri. I think that there were times that they got out of position with poor footwork, and you're better off holding. At that point, I don't care if you have to tackle the guy from behind, Amanda. I mean, tonight you'll be at that game where the Packers are playing, okay? Aaron Rodgers is one of the all-time greats. He would tell, and so would the coaches, one of his offensive linemen, if you get beat because you're in a bad position, tackle the dude. Because the worst thing that could happen would be Aaron Rodgers to get hurt. You could say the same thing for Ryan Tannehill at Tennessee.
Yeah, that would be the worst thing is Aaron Rodgers goes down. But I mean, we've seen it this season. Aaron Rodgers he's gotten sacked quite a few times this year already. But Hendon Hooker does not get sacked quite a few times. I mean, he's there. This offensive line deserves a lot of credit. That's all I'm saying.
What are you looking forward to most about the game tonight before we get to today's tough question?
What am I looking to forward? Oh.
I can tell you mine. May I share mine first?
Sure, go ahead.
I would not eat all day so I could eat as many brats as possible. I love brats. They're my favorite thing. If my family would allow it, they would replace turkey as the Thanksgiving dinner. I love brats. So that's what I would do. But I like them without the bun, with just the pepper and the onions, like in a bowl. I'm really weird. But I love brats. So, like, if I were you and your husband, David, I would not be eating all day so that I could force feed myself as many brats as possible.
That makes me want to vomit.